coming up next on The Health Hustle.
Getting still and understanding who you are on a deeper level will really give you the guidance that you're looking for. I think a lot of people are mostly unsure of like how to do this or how to do that and how to show up in lots of ways. But I think if you get really, really still on a daily basis and you get into a high level practice of meditation, you can ask these questions before meditating and you'll rediscover the answer. And you'll also align yourself with your truest self, which is loving awareness. So then, that'll be guiding you as you build your business, so to speak. It'll be aligned with who you are and your values. So I think just getting still on a daily basis is probably the best thing, not just for business owners, just for all walks of life, to just know who you are on a deeper level. And then that can really transform you into your business.
What's up, y'all? Corey here. I'm actually recording this introduction out of Los Angeles, California, because last weekend I was in Newport, California, celebrating some of my closest friends' wedding, Ross and Savannah. It was an amazing time. And so the person I'm actually interviewing on this podcast episode, though, is Justin LOVato, who ironically lived in Los Angeles for a long time, working in the bodybuilding industry with the mecca of bodybuilders at Gold's Gyms. Prior to getting him on the show, something I do with all my guests is I have a short call just to kind of hear a little bit about their story. And I knew very quickly that Justin was somebody I wanted to bring on the show, and he is myopically present, which you'll notice throughout the course of this interview. Some of the other things that we get into are why he saunas for 1 hour, which I found fascinating and is something that I want to try myself. How he got into bodybuilding in the first place, dropping out of school, the dark side of the bodybuilding industry, how he's been able to accumulate 10,000 Instagram posts, meeting his partner, coming from a place of service whenever you're a coach or a trainer, thoughts of unworthiness, the art of pausing, why he thinks Jesus and Buddha are gangster, a rapid fire question round, master being at peace, getting still, and so much more. One last thing, if you're a health or fitness professional and you're having difficulties getting leads, one of the most common reasons that I see this is not having a well-defined niche. If you go to the link in the description, I have a free 3-step process that walks you through exactly how to get clarity on which niche is best suited for you and your business. Without further ado, let's go. Because what are you doing for sauna right now?
I really try to, I set my timer for an hour and I try to do like a full hour straight, and I'll go in and meditate. So I'll go in.
Wait. You're in the sauna for an hour?
Yeah, I try to do an hour.
Straight?
Yeah.
You don't get out?
Yeah.
What is the temperature?
It's pretty hot, but if you go in and meditate and you're like, your eyes are closed and you're not opening your mouth, you're not talking, and you kind of like fall into your breath, it's not too challenging. If I do get out before an hour, it's more so because of boredom, not because it's difficult.
Really? What is the temperature of the sauna?
Well, the one on it's pretty hot. It's around, I think it's around like 200.
Do you ever get concerned that you're going to pass out or that you're dehydrated?
No, I think when you're meditating, it's much easier to regulate and to keep your body cooler. Again, like I think a lot of people, when they go into the sauna, their eyes are open and they're talking and they're moving around. If you go in and kind of like find your cadence of your breath and you elongate your breath and your mouth is closed, your eyes are closed, you probably stay significantly cooler. And you just fall into a meditative state. Time can go by pretty well. And then I do this on purpose, though. It can get challenging, but I think if you're meditating and you know your body well, and it's not like I did this like right off the bat.
Right. Yeah, you worked up to it.
Yeah, I worked up to it. I think that's important. And
has anybody done this with you, or do you just do it by yourself?
I have some people that try to stay in there with me, for sure.
Do they last the whole time?
Some can, yeah. But I mean, I've even done temescals. Temescals are really, I did a 3-hour temescal.
Wait, what? What is that?
It's like a sauna. It's like a sweat lodge, but it's a ceremony.
Oh.
So it's done in the heat, and they bring in like lava rocks, and they go through, like it's chanting. It's like a full ceremony, and you're like in there with like 30 people, and you're sitting on a stone floor, and you're like in a ball because there's like no room. And it's actually, what's funny is it's more uncomfortable, the seating, than it is the heat. But again, like you're there with people, you're chanting.
This is in South America, right?
This was actually in Mexico, the one I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was in there for like 2.5, 3 hours.
Damn.
Yeah.
Man, okay, well, this is total off-show topic and all those things, but obviously that was very interesting to talk about. So I'm glad we tapped into that a little bit. I would love to try the hour with you at some point. I mean, I've done maybe, I don't know, half hour, maybe more than that, but I feel like I reach a breaking point where your brain just kind of turns into mush because, like, I don't know, you're just hot and uncomfortable. But
I think it's also important. A lot of people here in the Western culture don't wear proper attire. I actually wear a beanie when I go in, and most people think that makes it harder, but actually it protects your brain. You know, like how you can, even if you want, you can bring your phone in, and if you don't wrap your phone up, it overheats. So it's the same thing with your brain. And so I wear a beanie when I go in, and it actually keeps my head cooler, and it also protects my hair. Have you ever noticed how hot your hair gets?
Yeah.
It gets really, really hot.
Or like jewelry or whatever.
Jewelry, yeah. And so that gets hot. And so that's directly, linked to your head. And so I wear a beanie when I go in, and most people think it's like tougher. And I'm like, no, well, you see the Russians are always wearing those canvas hats.
Right.
To protect their brain and protect their hair.
Oh, man. Well, this isn't how I expected to start the show. Justin David LOVato, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited. I obviously do a lot of digging with my guests before I bring them on, and you're a physically intimidating person, but then after talking to you, you're a very calm, present, peaceful person.
Thank you.
So I'm excited to kind of unveil both aspects of that of your life. And where I really want to start is growing up in New York. And I'm curious because as somebody who, your words, not mine, has always kind of been more or less a present person.
Yes.
Almost to fault.
Yeah.
I'd be curious as to, was that in all related to your upbringing or how you just grew up as a child?
I think it's just how my brain works. It was, I wasn't awareingly choosing to be or stay as a present childlike person. It's just something that I was able to do as a kid. I wasn't aware that I was doing it, but it definitely carried well into my adult years. I think I was present childlike without any awareness of this until literally the age of 30. Like I was just kind of going through life and in a really wonderful way. And, like that ignorance is bliss type of thing. But I was always really good about listening to my intuitiveness, and it was always leading me in the right way, so to speak. And it's always been really powerful. And I when I became aware of how powerfully present I was, and then I became aware that most people weren't operating that way, I became really curious as to like, oh, how did I obtain this? But I don't think there was anything that I actually was doing. I just didn't get consumed by my experiences as a kid, even though I went through uncomfortable experiences and what many would call traumatic experiences. I was always able to, again, unawareingly understand that it wasn't personal, and I didn't take on any of the experiences or identify with them. So it allowed me to stay in this state of presence as opposed to identifying with those experiences and creating stories around them or identifying with them. Yeah.
I know you've talked about how you're not much of a consumer, but even as a child, did you do much reading?
No.
None.
I didn't start reading till I can read and could always read, but I didn't actually start reading till about 3.5 years ago, actually, like consistently.
Oh my gosh.
I always was labeled in school because my lack of focus, because I was so myopically present. So when it's almost like, again, to a fault, anything could grab kind of my attention as a kid. But I don't think that was actually the case. I just think the way the school systems were run, and I wasn't just interested in what they were teaching, so I'd rather be somewhere else so they couldn't grab my attention. That was a really good ability, is just to always kind of be present. And so at the same sense, though, like if the book didn't capture my attention, I would read the page and I wouldn't take in the information because I really wasn't present with that page. And I believed I was bad at reading and comprehending, and I created a story around that. And so I essentially was like, oh, this just isn't for me most of my adult life. And I realized it had nothing to do with reading and comprehension, it had everything to do with focus. So once I started getting into meditation, within literally, I think the second day that I meditated, I was able to take in the information. That was it. It was like done. I could read moving forward. Just like the second day of meditation, I was like, oh, I can totally read and comprehend. It had nothing to do with that. It's just focus.
So as a child then, because I'm always curious as to kind of what maybe shapes who you are today. It always reminds me of like the Tony Robbins story about how he grew up in a household where just a very abusive father figure and always trying to like deal with stressful situations, and how that's made him somebody that's very present and empathetic and very good at reading body language because he was forced to as a child, essentially, because of the issues that his parents were dealing with. So he had to know when stressful situations might cause harm to somebody. And so I'm just curious as to you is, were you just always more interested in being in your environment and learning from the things around you, or were there things that happened that shaped you to be more present?
The first one. Yeah, I think I just enjoyed just being in my environment and learning through experiences firsthand, and that's kind of still how I go through life. I don't do really any research on a lot of the things that I'm actually into now. It's the same way I got into weight training at a young age. It's the same way I got into meditation and breath work. Even when I started meditating, I don't think I even used the word meditation. When I started getting into breath work, I didn't know what breath work was a thing. Like I said, I'm not a consumer in any way. Even when I moved to LA and was bodybuilding at the time, I just picked a random gym, and then somebody was like, hey, have you been to the Mecca yet? And I'm like, what's the Mecca? Because I didn't consume even bodybuilding material. So I had no idea that the biggest, most prestigious gym in the world was right down the street from me, and I had no idea it existed or it was popular or any sense. So I'm just a horrible consumer in all aspects.
How did you figure out some of that stuff in the early days then? Like, how did you even know bodybuilding was a thing, just from like the people that were doing it around you in your environment? Or
So I grew up in a small town, and I was easily the largest and strongest person in like not only my area, but multiple areas. So people would always just say like, wow, like you're a big guy, or like, hey, do you bodybuild? And so I was always asked if I was a bodybuilder.
Before you even got into it?
Yeah. It was something I was never even interested in. I didn't follow like Arnold. I've never bought a bodybuilding magazine in my life still to this day.
You just got those bovine genes, huh?
Yeah. And, I started training at 14 years old just because I just went into my friend's house at the time, and his mom had one of those sandbag sets where the weights were plastic with sand in them. We were just hanging around, goofing around downstairs, and like I just started doing like curls at age 14, maybe even 13. And my friend made just such a big deal about like how big my arms got. And I just started going over there every day and just playing with his mom's weight set. And that's how I got into training with weights. I was already training at a high level with sports though, because of my stepdad, but not with weights. And then I on the basketball team, they had us, play ball for an hour and then weight train for an hour around age 14. So I was probably like 135 pounds my freshman year, which is a normal average weight, I would say. And when I was weight training, I never thought to look in the mirror. Again, just a high lack of awareness of like even my body changing. I remember I went away for like 3 months training basketball and weight training. And when I came back, all my friends were like, yo, what happened to you? And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, you're huge. And I'm like, I had no idea I was huge. And I had no idea that I put on 40 pounds.
40?
Yeah, I went from 135 pounds to about 185, 189 pounds in one summer. Yeah.
They're like, dude, did a spider bite you and you turned into Spider-Man? Like, what happened?
Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, lifting through puberty was definitely something that helped tremendously. And
have you ever had any health issues?
No.
None. Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely none.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're just genetically geared to be a good muscle gainer, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I also just I'm athletically sound. I'm biomechanically sound. Like I knew how to intuitively train and connect to my muscles even at a young age. That was one of the reasons why I was such a good athlete. As I just know how to move naturally and be athletic naturally. It's not something I really had to learn, and I learned well with it as well if I'm being taught. So when I came back, and everybody noticed my size but me, and I don't think I even looked in the mirror the first 3 or 4 years of training. It just wasn't an interest to me. Even the wrestling coach, because I was baseball, basketball up until I would say my sophomore year, and then I quit both. And the wrestling coach was like, you got to come wrestle. And I'm like, okay. So I went and wrestled, and I was the only wrestler still out of everybody on the team, I was the only one weight training. So I would still be weight training in the morning, wrestling in the afternoon. And so by the time I was a senior, I actually never made it to my senior year. I dropped out. But by the time I would have been a senior, I was already like 220 pounds as an 18-year-old kid. And by the time I was like 19, when I finally did a bodybuilding thing, because everybody kept asking, I was like 235 just from training.
Do you know who Brock Lesnar is?
Yeah, I know who Brock Lesnar is, yeah. He was a big wrestler too. Like
a
real wrestler.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Because
he's a freak.
I'm from Minnesota. And so he wrestled, I think, at the University of Minnesota, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was a freak, yeah. I remember
now that I'm calling you a freak, but like, yes, he was genetically like, whoa, dude, that's crazy.
Just a large human.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not very tall. I'm 5'11", but like my hands are big. Like my trunk, front to back is really big. My shoulders are really broad. I even, when I was in LA, I got called in to do like a commercial of some sort at USC, the football stadium. And it was basically, they were doing an episode on like a strong man, not versus, but compared to like a bodybuilder. And they picked me, and they just wanted to see what it was like underneath like a DEXA scan and like all these other things. They were just trying to see the comparison. And when they put me in the DEXA scan, I came back with the densest bones in USC history. And this is like, they test all the football players and everything there. So I had the densest bones that they've ever recorded. And then I went back like 2 years later because they were real curious, and they got even denser. So yeah, that's a lot from weight training though. Like you get dense bones from being underweight.
What were you eating though? What were you eating as a child or growing up or when you were weight training? Classic bodybuilding stuff?
No. Well, again, because I didn't really look into what bodybuilding stuff was. I grew up in a very simple household. So I had a stepfather, not my real father, a stepfather that predominantly raised me. And he was a jockey. So he was a little dude, but he was a professional athlete. And so he was a very good professional athlete, very good jockey, knew how to train, had wonderful mechanics, knew how to train his body in a really powerful way. Just really good at all things. Even as just a really little person, just could do all the sports. And so he also ate really clean, in the household. We didn't have things in the house like chips or sodas or anything like that at all. It just wasn't in my household. So I just wasn't exposed to it. So I grew up predominantly just eating eggs and drinking milk and eating bread as a kid. And of course cereal, because I think every kid had cereal, but even then, like, even though it still was shit cereal, my mom wouldn't buy like Fruity Pebbles or anything like that. I was getting like Raisin Bran, even though that's still shit. But that's what I was kind of like eating growing up. And when I even got into bodybuilding, like I was just like, oh, okay, I'll just eat eggs. This makes sense. I was a big egg person, still am. Like I was eating like 6 to 8 eggs as a kid.
Cooked or raw? Cooked.
Yeah, I don't think we actually digest the Rocky style raw eggs. So. Yeah. I enjoy eggs to this day. It's one of my main staples. It's what I have each day is still eggs. It's probably the best food you can eat.
I just had some this morning. People talk a lot about that. They're all fearful of cholesterol, yada, yada, but that's all bogus. But okay, I want to move forward with your journey here a little bit then. So obviously you had a proclivity for putting on muscle, bodybuilding, weight training, which eventually found your way out to LA, which is kind of like, that was the, I guess, origin of a lot of your career, right?
Yeah, so I moved to California, again, not for bodybuilding, at 25. I have a younger brother who just randomly asked me one day, like, hey, do you want to move to California? And again, because I really didn't think too much on things, I was like, yeah, let's do it. And when that time came, I put my 2 weeks notice. At the time, I was taking care of mentally handicapped people for about 5 years, from age 20 to 25.
Doing what?
Taking care of mentally handicapped people.
But what were you doing exactly?
A developmental aid. So I just pretty much helped them get through their day, whether it be showering, medication, helping them walk, changing them, taking them on outings and stuff like that. Yeah, so I was doing that from age 20 to 25.
Can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
So I used to, I guess technically still am an occupational therapist. I don't really practice anymore. So I'm very familiar with a lot of those settings and caretaking and skilled nursing facilities and mental health and all that stuff. Is there a reason that you decided to do that of all other professions? And also, what did you learn from it?
No. Before that, so I dropped out of school pretty much at the end of my sophomore year. I went back a little bit my junior year and tried to cram all these classes in, which was horrible. So I wound up just leaving my junior year. And I think my mom was concerned, like any mom would be like, oh shit, like what is he going to do?
My kid's a dropout.
Yeah, my kid's a dropout. So I went to a trade school and got into masonry, and which I love manual labor. I still to this day. Like I mean, I could still do manual labor today and have a blast. I can dig holes for days and absolutely love it. So, I really enjoyed the trade school. I loved masonry too, because I just like, it's funny. It's like, I'm not into art, but I love the artistic part of it that's still in masonry, like making it look beautiful, creating with your hands and stuff like that. Even just the technique of using a trowel was really cool, just the way to do it. So I found that really fun, but I only did that for about 2 years. And I was dating a girl at the time, and her parents were involved in working for the state, and they were in that field. And I actually fell off a scaffolding. So I fell off scaffolding like 50 feet. I fell like 50 feet off a scaffolding, and nothing happened. I was fine.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, I was perfectly
Those
fine.
dense bones, man.
Yeah. It was pretty. Nobody could believe it. I actually hit my PR on my squat till this day. The next day, and yeah. When I was like 20, I was probably just a ridiculous machine. It was absolutely wild. Like I could do everything, and I was really strong, really explosive.
You're in your 30s
really
now?
fast. I'm 40.
40, okay.
Yeah, I'm 40.
You look
now.
great.
Thank you. Yeah, so when I fell off a scaffolding, they're like, don't come to work for like a couple months. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to train. They're like, that's fine. Just don't come to work. So I was chilling for about a month or so. And my girlfriend at the time, she was like, hey, why don't you check out this job of becoming a developmental aide for the mentally challenged? And I was like, all right, cool. So I took the tests, and yeah, I started doing that. And I did that for 5 years before moving to California. And the only reason why I quit that was my brother just made the suggestion, and I went out to California age 21 for a friend's wedding, fell in love with it. It was in San Diego, but I wound up in LA. And 2 weeks before me and my brother were supposed to make the move, he backed out. And I was like, okay, well, I already put my 2 weeks in.
Why did he back out real quick?
A girl.
Oh, okay.
A girl.
Got it.
A girl. So he stayed. And at the time, this is when MySpace was around. And I was talking to a girl at the time on MySpace who was in LA. And she was originally from a town that was only like 10 minutes from my small town. So we had that in common. And I was just telling her my situation. I'm like, yeah, I don't know how I'm going to really kind of do this now, because I didn't think about any of the protocols of like how to move out there, all those kind of things, where I was going to live, also the cost of living. I didn't even look into it. Again, very myopic in some ways, to a fault. Mm-hmm. And she's like, why don't you come to LA instead? And you can crash with me for a little bit. And this was in 2008 during the recession. And I didn't even know there was a recession, which allowed me to also just find jobs, no problem,
right.
Which is kind of cool.
Definitely.
So I moved out to LA and got 3 jobs. I was bouncing. I actually got a job at the Gold's Gym in North Hollywood, working the front desk and doing a little bit of PT, barely any, because I wasn't certified through them, but they still let me fuck around a little bit with it. And then I met somebody at the gym, a gentleman who ran this valet company, and he was suspicious of somebody like stealing from him, the manager there. So he's like, hey, could you come in and like audit for me and just like run the place for a little bit and see if anything comes up? And like the person was stealing like $100,000 a month. And so I let him know. And then he's like, well, do you want a job? And I'm like, yeah. So I became the manager of this really high level valet company, and like looked over 14 locations and had a really great paying job as soon as I moved to LA. Yeah.
Why did he trust you to check over his finances?
I have no idea, to be honest.
Was he a friend of yours?
No, I think he was actually hitting on me.
Oh.
So I think it was more so like that. He found, yeah. And again, like I wasn't aware of that either. It's so funny. I had no idea he was hitting on me in any way. Yeah.
Okay.
Completely oblivious to it.
It adds up. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. That was something also very new in LA. The gay community is way more profound in LA than it was in my hometown. Sure. So I was oblivious to that, which was also very new for me. And
I'm sure you got a lot of clients that way when you did the training thing, though.
Yeah, I mean, I was so so oblivious to it. Even like, you know, when people would approach me for photo shoots and, you know, and they would just lie about who they were shooting for or who the hell that was about. And then, you know, all right, yeah, I'll do a photo shoot. You shoot for Flex Magazine. Like, all right, that's cool. And then you get to their space and I'm like, man, this is not what it is. Like, I'm not going to wear a towel and pretend, you know, I'm not clothed underneath it. So I would be like, yeah, I'm done here. And I would just take off. And like, that was a big thing in the bodybuilding community, especially before social media. It was a lot of inappropriate messaging. In the industry, we called it gay for pay. Yeah. And, that's a big thing in the bodybuilding community, or maybe in other communities as well. But I was very unaware of that. And it was something that was always being, offered in my early years of bodybuilding. People always offering money for services and stuff like that.
Basically just like look good, act like you're gay, and we'll give you money kind of thing.
I think it went farther than that. I never partook. It was something that I never partook, never was interested in partaking. It felt grimy. It felt dirty.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was not down with it. It's one of the things I really didn't like about the industry. And it was actually in the industry itself. It was like within the actual competitions, it was a lot of men were doing it to the women. A lot of men were doing it to the men, and bodybuilders, most of them, you know, they're broke as a joke, especially at that time before Instagram came out. I think Instagram helped a lot of people kind of be able to step outside of that. But I was working. I had a regular job where most bodybuilders, they didn't have a regular job and they're, you know, doing some side stuff. And so I think a lot of them were consumed by that type of unfortunate shit. Like, yeah. And they're selling their soul, so to speak.
Yeah, well, the bodybuilding world in general is pretty political. I mean, even in the short stint that I did a couple physique shows back when I was living in Minnesota, nothing to the degree of anything you've accomplished. You're way far more versed in it than I am. But even in the small window of time that I did a little bit of it, it felt very, political. Like you could buy your way to certain trophies. I mean, it's a glorified beauty pageant at the end of the day. And it's fun because it pushes you, it challenges you, it gets you on stage to kind of push your body to the limits that it's never been to before. But I don't think I'll ever do it again.
Yeah, likewise. I actually really didn't care for show day for a number of reasons. I didn't like the last couple of weeks just because the body would actually get so unhealthy.
Yes.
That's one of the things I really didn't care. The reason why I liked bodybuilding was the discipline aspect of it, and obviously the gym aspect of it. Something I really enjoyed doing and seeing what my body could do. Competition days weren't enjoyable for me. I just like training, and I think so many people were just telling me I should do bodybuilding, and I could do well at it. I kind of fell into it, but I really didn't care to do the shows. And for me, like no longer doing it was pretty easy to step away.
Same. Yeah. I totally agree. I think that's kind of a common route, is that people really enjoy the aspect of just like weight training and pushing their body. And then it's almost just like kind of like the next step. Yeah. It's like, well, why don't you try really pushing it and get it on stage and standing against somebody? And then it's like, all right, I already like this weight training thing. Why not? Yeah. I'll say my biggest complaint by far, though, I was telling my girlfriend this the other day, is how cold I got, especially living in Minnesota when your body fat percentage is that low. Oh, yeah. It's the most like bone chilling, uncomfortable cold, to your point of like you're not even healthy anymore. Yeah. Like your body, I remember somebody telling me, I don't know if this is accurate or not, you can probably correct me, but basically saying that to keep your body warm actually isn't a necessity for survival. And to be that cold or to be that low in body fat, you're basically putting calories towards keeping your organs running and keeping your brain going. So like the other thermal aspect of like making you feel warm isn't actually necessary for survival, because like your body fat percentage is so low that you're almost in starvation mode. So your body's like, I'm just going to use the calories that I can to basically keep you alive. Keep you alive. Point. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if it was accurate, but I was like, that makes sense, because I didn't matter how many layers I had on. I was cold 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't really enjoy those last few weeks of bodybuilding. But yeah, I mean, bodybuilding in general, I don't think was really my thing. I think I just kind of was told I was too good at it, and I did, and because I liked training, it was something I enjoyed. But yeah, it was nice to step away from, especially, you know, I was a natural professional bodybuilder from age 19, 20-ish till age 26. And, you know, when I went out to LA, and I did want to compete against the best in the world. So that's why I jumped on gear for the first time around age 26. But by age 30, it was just something that was like, yeah, this is not healthy and it's not good for you. And I never liked sticking myself. That was awful. Yeah, so I was really happy to kind of step away from it. And I was an athlete, and I became so one-dimensional with bodybuilding. And then I finally started getting injured because of this one-dimensional style of training. And once I saw that I was getting injured for the first time in my life, because I felt like I was indestructible before, I was like, something has to change. And so it felt really good to step away at around age of 30, 31. Yeah.
Same story, man. I didn't, I started getting injured too, like probably, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s. And because, yeah, you can be so myopic with this specific training style of just quote unquote building muscle that at the end of the day, it's like you start getting all sorts of imbalances.
Yeah.
It's like you maybe look good, but I didn't feel good by any means.
Yeah. And it was trendy at that time. I mean, I think Instagram came out when I was like 27. So, I mean, that exploded the fitness industry. I mean, that's when the fitness industry really took off, was with IG. So it also kind of fed the industry a bit more. You know, a lot of people were going to the gym. The gyms exploded with all types of people. So yeah, but it was nice to step away and get back into athletic training. It took me a while though to like kind of change my style of training. I think I still trained a lot like a bodybuilder well into like my 30s, but I was starting to finally, you know, do some mobility work, and I was starting to get into animal flow, and I wasn't touching kettlebells or maces or clubs like that nothing conventional yet, but I was starting to play around a little bit more out back with like handstands and like beach workouts and getting into yoga and stuff like that. So like I definitely was going in the right direction once I stopped.
Speaking of Instagram, I noticed that you have almost 10,000 posts.
I post a lot.
That is astronomical to me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's I really I don't take much time posting, which is kind of funny. So I'm the type of person that like something would crack me up and I was just like, oh, that's funny, and I would just throw it out there. You know, I wouldn't be like taking my time doing a post, so to speak. And when Instagram first hit, I was definitely into like just sharing kind of anything, and it was before stories were too. So I always had a blast. Like anything that would crack me up, I was just like, I'm gonna just share this with everybody, and it would just be like, boom, I just throw it out there. And like even if you looked at like my my texts and the thing, that it'd be like nothing. It'd be like, let's go, and that'd be it. So like the way I would post was also very carefree, which allowed them to add up quite a bit. And yeah, I always just crack up with certain things. I always really enjoyed social media. And social media for me was never about business, even though it created the business for me. I definitely don't approach Instagram in a business way whatsoever. It was always about sharing what brought me joy and like what could possibly bring others joy. So yeah, I know there are a lot. I looked at that. I'm like, damn, I never noticed how many posts had over, I would say like 13 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet you it was at least 10 years that you've probably been posting.
Yeah, 13 years now, yeah.
Curious as to, so because I thought I posted a lot, and I was just looking at mine the other day, and I'm at like maybe 300 something. And so in the almost 10,000 posts that you've done, what have you learned since the beginning to now that maybe we could teach other people of like, I don't know, using it smarter?
Well, for me, like, again, like, I don't think I was ever posting to have any validation. So I think that's one. You know, I was always posting, again, like Instagram really always brought me a lot of joy, and I always really shared, like I shared everything I shared. Like I would take a picture of like my joints, you know what I mean? And be like, yeah, like let's go, time to train. I would just take a picture of a joint. Like that was my post. It was almost like a diary, if you will. Like I was just like, yeah, I'll just throw it up there, you know, or like it'd be like just the sunset with it was like a lot of things. So I think posting carefree could be really powerful, and not caring about what other people think is something that I've always been able to do at a really good level, and that's what made it always enjoyable for me. I wasn't checking my social media to see if people liked it or didn't like it. It's something I really wasn't interested in or needing validation. You know, I think when you know yourself and you know your truth, you know your values, you can have a lot of fun with it. Now, when I was first posting, that did significantly change was the type of post. So I was definitely over-sexualized, I think, like most people are nowadays, just because of the culture. So a lot of it was booty, a lot of booty pics of, you know, me and my partner at the time. But it was all coming from almost like a fun place. It wasn't perverse in any way, but I was still over-sexualized. So that was one thing that I learned through my plant medicine ceremonies and stuff like that, that I can keep some of that stuff for myself, keep it sacred. And so I realized, like, just as a culture, like, you almost have to do your part to not put it out there, I feel, because there's a lot of people that are watching, a lot of kids that are watching, a lot of people that may not know that it's a joke, or maybe they don't see the humor in it. Like, because I was actually always so confused when I would get hit up in the direct message from people asking if we were swingers or if we were interested in that. And it was always a no. Like, it was like, no, we're not into that at all. I really, honored our relationship, and we were all about that. And so, like, I was even unaware of, like, how I was over sexualized. And it was a really cool DMT experience that I had that pointed it out. Like, hey, like, and it was a really cool experience. It was actually Betty Boop, the cartoon. You ever?
Oh yeah.
Black and white
Yep.
cartoon character. And in this DMT, that's what came up was this cartoon. This cartoon at the time represented my wife, Steph. And super sexy, because that's what the character was, super voluptuous, sexy, all that kind of stuff. Then the character looked at me, which represented Steph at the time, was like, hey, why don't you keep some of this for yourself? And I was like, whoa. And ever since then, I stopped posting that kind of stuff. I, like, totally stopped. And I realized, like, wow, I didn't realize that I've been over-sexualized. It was innocent. It wasn't like I knew and I was all about it. It was just, I just wasn't aware of it.
How did you meet Steph?
So I was a trainer, independent trainer at Gold's, and Steph was just visiting, not me, just visiting California by herself. She's from Canada originally, and I just saw her walking through the gym, and I didn't recognize her. And when you're there for 8 to 10 hours a day training clients, you kind of get to know everybody. It becomes kind of a family there as well, which is pretty cool. Big community. But I was like, whoa, who's that? And she was there for a number of weeks. And I saw a lot of guys go up to her and talk to her. So I didn't just want to be another person that went up to her. So I gave some space. For like 6 weeks, I didn't really say anything. Just some head nods. And she got to see who I was essentially in the gym. And then eventually I said hello and invited her to a party that I was throwing for my birthday. And then we just kind of started hanging out every single day. And from that, we really cultivated a beautiful relationship. And
Did she say she noticed you early on?
I don't know if I was definitely noticeable. I was 280 something pounds at the time. and that was pretty wild. I have a mohawk now, but I had probably a wild mohawk then. And, at the time, I think I literally just wore like Under Armour spandex shorts at the time, my legs were probably like 32, 33 inches around. And I'm just like walking around like,
dude, that's my waist.
Like, yeah, it was a lot of people's waist. Yeah. So I'm sure she could not miss me. But yeah, and then after 6 weeks of chatting, she you have to go back after hanging out for 3 months in the States. And I was like, I don't want you to leave. And she didn't want to leave. I'm like, well, why don't we get married? And she's like, really? I go, yeah. And I'm like, if it doesn't work, we'll just get divorced. And she's like, okay. So
Just so nonchalant.
I think that's the best approach, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I would approach it that way now, because I really understand the importance of a divine union in powerful ways, and I enjoy what a marriage represents now. But it worked out really beautifully, like we were in love, and we were married for 8 years, and she was like my best friend. Yeah, she was my wife for 8 years, and it was probably some of the best years of my life for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, would never change anything. Yeah.
I love that you can say that about that. I was married at one point too, and yeah, there's so many lessons to be learned from the first one as to what you don't want to do to the next one in terms of like just making it more important, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, I think me and Steph's relationship is still so incredibly close. I talk to her almost daily. We're really good friends, so we visit each other often. Yeah,
she's still in LA?
She is in San Diego now.
Okay.
So she went to San Diego, and yeah, she's surfing. She's still doing her nutrition and training and stuff like that. So she's still in that space. Yeah, like Steph's one of my favorite people all the time. She's my family. She's one of my closest friends, one of my best friends, and she's one of my rocks to this day. Like she knows me deeper on any level than anybody, and it's fucking awesome. I love that I have her in my life still. Yeah, and even when we separated, it had nothing to do with our relationship being poor in any ways. It was just like more so self-discovery, like kind of figuring out who we are, and having that ability to do that while still being supported from one another. Like the relationship, yeah, in some ways the dynamic has changed, but the unconditional love is still there. So, Steph really wanted to get to know who she was in a lot of ways. And, I was going on my path with a lot of the work I'm doing now. And so we could love and support each other as we go into the new chapter. Even though we're no longer romantically together, we're still very close and support one another.
What is advice that you would give to other trainers out there now that you've gone through that experience of really building a lot of your early career on having clients, being a trainer, and then eventually getting out of that? What would you maybe tell somebody else that's maybe in that similar space?
Not just trainers, but all coaches. I think a lot of, and this kind of is really, I think, profound. I think a lot of people that get into most of their work or any type of industry or coaching industry, they have to be from a place of service. I think a lot of people unconsciously, and most of the things that they get into, specifically coaching, I think it's still tied to their worth. And it's unconscious, I feel, for a lot of people. And so when they're not getting the client, or when the client can't sign up with them, they take it personal. They see it as something wrong with them, or they even actually get upset with the client or the individual that doesn't sign up with them, as opposed to understanding like, hey man, people are terrified to commit to themselves. People feel unworthy to commit to themselves. So it's about really being of service, especially when you're in that industry. And that's one thing I always did. It's like I if someone couldn't sign up with me, I didn't make it personal. I wasn't mad if someone didn't follow through or didn't show up or any of those things. I understand people are going through their things. People have life and all of their mind movies and thoughts and unworthiness about them. And my goal was to always just be a safe space for people. And so I was, I realized, that I was kind of already in this field of holding space, so to speak, from taking care of mentally handicapped people, then with the PT work. So when I became aware that I'm good at that is what allowed me to go into the next space, which is, the work I do now.
What makes you good at that, would you say? Like, what are the skills or the mindsets that you have around something like that? Because I'm just thinking for somebody else right now in that circumstance of maybe they have a client or a patient, or maybe they're consulting somebody or coaching in some way, shape, or form, and they're challenged or frustrated by the fact that maybe their person isn't doing what they want them to do, or they're not listening, or they're not following through, or what's maybe the skill in that?
I think, again, like not making it about you. Yeah, it's like understanding that, especially as a coach, we're there to hold space. We're there to hold space and not judge. I think when we become frustrated, it's a form of judgment. When we become impatient, it's a form of judgment. And if you really look at that, it's kind of mirroring you, and kind of it's like hitting parts of your worthiness. And so my work has never been tied to my worth, and still isn't to this day. So that's what makes my job so much fun, and especially the job I do now, because I work with people in the field of depression and the field of anxiety and, addiction and all this kind of stuff. And so like, man, I can have some of the best calls ever with individuals, and like, yeah, they want to sign up and they want to work with you, and then you don't hear from them. And a lot of coaches that I actually work with, a lot of coaches that are working through that. It's literally what they're working through. I'm like, you can't tie your work, especially for if you're in service, like they'll feel that. If you're trying to get clients to be worthy, they feel that unconsciously you're not safe. And that's what most people are jumping on calls for. They're like, oh, I got to nail this client because I got to pay rent, or I got to nail this client to be enough, to be worthy of my work, because it's tied to that. And if you're doing calls, even though it's unconscious, either within you and them, it's felt. And that person knows that you're not there for them. So I think that's what allowed me to be successful as a trainer and as a mentor now, is the fact that everything that I'm doing is for the individual. And whether they work with me or not, I'm always there if they need anything. I'm always a safe space for them, and without judgment, without evaluation.
I love that. What do you tie your worth to now then, if anything, for that matter?
I don't. Yeah, I would say I don't.
Because I agree. I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I love that idea of people can more or less feel or sense the subconscious vibes, I guess, you're putting out there in those circumstances. Like if you feel scarce or in a desperate situation, people are going to pick up on that, versus actually being in a position where you genuinely want to help them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sales 101. I was talking to my buddy Connor about this the other day, who did sales for a long time. And he's like, literally the best sales skills is to actually care.
Yeah. And so I did that at always a very natural way, because I don't have thoughts of unworthiness. So I think, and I know for sure, because that's what I do for work, is I work with all types of people. And it's usually they're suffering, or all of them are suffering from thoughts of unworthiness, of I'm not enough, that I am unlovable, I'm not capable. And this is something that collectively most of the population struggles with. And it's a few powerful factors that most people just aren't simply aware of. And, one, our parents, whether they're quote unquote good parents or bad parents, they unconsciously raise us to be socially acceptable. So they're punishing and or rewarding us based off our performance, based off what they think society thinks is good or bad. So as a child, you're getting consistently judged. And so when you get punished as a child, you're not aware of the system, and you see it as I am unworthy, I'm not enough, I'm unlovable. And so that becomes a story at a very young age when you get punished. And then the school systems reinforce this. So school's another big component, pass or fail. Children don't get good grades because they love the curriculum. They get good grades so they get praised by their parents, so they get their allowance, so the peers think they're smart. And then the dogmatic religions on top of that, heaven or hell. So people are trying to be good to get into heaven as opposed to be good just to be good. And if you're not good, you're going to hell and you're a failure. You're unworthy of heaven. And so this collectively is a very, very powerful story, conditioning program, behavior that most people exist with. So most people, when they are getting good grades, when they go to college, when they become the doctor, the lawyer, when they get the hot body, when they have the car, all these things are to be enough, are to be worthy of love finally. And that's why most people, when they actually become the doctor, or they get the body, they still feel unworthy because they don't realize it's a story, it's a program, it's a conditioning within the mind. And so that's what needs to change, is to understand that it actually isn't real. It's just a program. It's never been true. And you can remove the story. Now it's just removing the story or reprogramming the brain that is not you.
What is the story you now tell yourself if you don't follow the narrative that is the get the job, get the house, get the wife, get the body?
I don't know if I necessarily have a story. I understand on a deeper level of who I am, which is loving awareness, which is consciousness, which is pure awareness. Yeah, experiencing this beautiful experience. And so I understand that. I conceptualize that on a very fundamental level. And so that's what I'm doing in life. It's experiencing life and doing that in the most loving way possible.
When did you figure that out for yourself? Because I think it's taken me a very long time I think the other expression that's used for what you're talking about is the hedonic treadmill. Like we somehow think that once we get to that next thing, that somehow things will be amazing or perfect or wonderful, whatever it is. It's regardless of what that actually is. But when did you figure that out?
I don't know if I necessarily figured it out. I more so was already operating from that space unconsciously. So like I said, I've been myopically present in everything that I do. I do not think about the past, and I do not think about the future on any level.
Does that ever get you in trouble?
I can definitely, one of the lessons I learned this year was discernment with individuals, because individuals can seek people out that are good-hearted, and they can manipulate. And if I'm not aware that possibly exists, and I just kind of let anybody into my home, let anybody into my house, some shit can happen sometimes. And
for sure.
Yeah, and that definitely happened this last year, actually. And so now I have discernment. My heart is still open, but I can just be a little bit more aware and less myopic with my presence. So really great lessons, hard ones for sure. But it quote unquote trouble. But I also, it gave me wonderful lessons to actually have the experiences to work with more people that are going through it. So I don't necessarily think they're bad. I try not to see things as good or bad. It's just reality. It's just what it is. I don't try to label it. And opportunities are within everything. So wonderful lessons, actually, even though they're uncomfortable.
I don't think I've ever asked this question before, and maybe there's not a good answer for it. I'm just curious. But I've been thinking a lot about discernment as well. I'm doing the same thing currently in my life, especially over the last probably 6 months. I've pulled back from a lot of things, just realizing I just don't have the time anymore. And it's nothing against people I want to spend time with or things I want to do. It's just recognizing where my time is best spent, I guess you could say. But I'm curious as to, from that aspect of discernment, is there any other way other than just experience to get better at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think practicing awareness can allow you to do that. It's something that I'm actually working on. There's a big difference between presence and awareness. You can be so incredibly present that you lack awareness. Yeah. And so and that's very, very true for me. So I can be so myopically present that I can truly lack awareness. I can be very focused with you right now, but the rest of the world kind of disappears for me. I'm not thinking about anything else but just being in this space. But that's how I live my entire life, is in this space, to a fault. Like I said, in kind of like an example of how my brain typically operates. Like I can, go to Guatemala and stay in a town for like 3 weeks and climb 4 mountains, but I couldn't tell you the name of the town that I went to, the coffee shop that I went to each and every day, or the mountains that I climbed. But I was incredibly present with those mountains. I was the mountain, I was the coffee. I enjoyed every moment of conversation I had with that individual who I couldn't tell you their name. So it's a very, very, very myopic way of operating. And it's something that I'm trying to actually become better at, because you can experience things in multiple ways. Like, yes, you can experience things in this heightened present space, but I can also, experience it in this way as well. And that's been really fun this last year, is being more aware of just things in general. Yeah.
I feel like I know the answer to this question. Are you much of a planner?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not. Which can, most of the time I'm really great about remembering, but sometimes I can definitely fuck up. If I get excitable, like, hey, you want to go do this, and I already made maybe plans, then I could definitely mess that up every now and then. But I've done a really good job unconsciously creating things in my life to allow me to be so flowy, so present, while still operating at a high level in other ways. So like for me, like having my calendar out, like on my countertop, it's always there. So I walk by it, 100 times a day, and I'll look at it. Every time I walk by, I'm like, oh yeah, 2:00. Oh yeah, 2:00. I mean, I even fucked up the time today. So that was more of a misread as opposed to an actual fuck up. But, and so I do a lot of the things that they actually teach people to actually free their mind up to be more flowy, to be more present. Like I have even something on my fridge called a daily practice board, or a presence board, which I introduced to all my clients. And I've written down like 25 different things that allow me to simply be more present, some really positive activities to do each and every day to train your brain to simply be more present. And
25? Do you do all 25?
No.
Okay.
I just have them there as options.
Got it.
And like things for like meditation, breath work, cold plunge, sauna, yoga, sunbathing, grounding, what have you. And so like that's just on my fridge. So like for me, it's really great. Like I walk by, I'm like, oh yeah, I have some downtime, I'll do that. I'm like, oh yeah, I have some downtime, I'll do that. And so like that's kind of like how I operate a lot of the ways. And then that becomes a new autopilot after a bit, right? Because your brain will definitely create some beautiful autopilot behaviors. So I've done a really good job at training my person, so to speak, and how to operate in a really, really cool way with these type of techniques.
I have a defense mechanism where I'll basically shut down. Like if I get angry or frustrated a lot of times, I think I learned it from my parents, honestly, is like just basically just shutting people out when you get angry. And I recognized it not that long ago. I was playing sand volleyball with it was me and a buddy versus my girlfriend and another one of our friends. And I was more frustrated with myself than anything, that I just wasn't playing very well, and we ended up losing. And I remember driving home, me and my girlfriend in the car, and feeling like I couldn't shake it. I couldn't get it out of my system. I was just stuck in this like brain fog of anger and frustration and annoyance. And you just got me thinking about that with your 25 things. One of the things I've been thinking about is like, I feel like in that moment, if you would have shoved my body into a cold plunge or something like that, I feel like I would have snapped out of it. Like I needed some sort of pattern disrupt to get me out of that state of mind. Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing that I teach actually, is learning the art of pausing. There's triggers, behaviors, and results. And so a trigger could be, like losing a game or being frustrated with your performance can definitely be the trigger. And then there's a behavior. And so the behavior could be like just upsetted thoughts or, brain fog or what have you. And it's another big thing is like learning how to observe your trigger. Most people don't observe their trigger. They are consumed by it and they identify with it. So that's another thing that I teach, is teaching people how to observe their triggers, their behaviors, and the result of those behaviors as the observer, as consciousness, as opposed to being consumed by it. And this takes practice. This takes meditation practice, because when you meditate, that's what you're essentially doing, is that you're shifting from selves. So most people are always operating from just the human self. And so when you meditate, you shift selves. You could shift to the observer, the higher self, so to speak. And so if you do this all the time on a daily basis, you kind of start operating from that higher self, and you can observe your human self much, much easier. So when you see your human self get triggered, you can help your human manage that trigger in a more positive way, and you can help them pause without getting pulled into, say, a mind movie of frustration. And then you can even ask them, like, well, how are you feeling right now? Like, you can have dialogue with your person. And so that's something that I do really well, is the ability to observe my avatar, my sentient being, so to speak. And when he's going through it, I can talk to him and have him pause, like when he's triggered. I'm like, hey, you see that you're triggered? And he's like, oh yeah, I'm triggered right now. And I'm like, well, you see the behavior you're about to go into? And I'm like, is that good, or do you want to do that? And I can ask him, and have real dialogue. And then he's like, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to be on my phone. I don't want to mindlessly scroll. I'm like, well, let's go put our feet on the grass. And he's like, oh yeah, that does work. I'm aware of that. That works because I've done that. Or, I can introduce him to something else that may be more positive. And what's great about that too, is after I do a more positive behavior, a bigger, better behavior, I can then ask my person, like, how do you feel? So I can create data for him. And then he's like, actually, I feel better. And there's good dialogue that. And then what's beautiful with the brain is built on reward-based learning. So after a few times of doing that, that can become the new autopilot behavior for your person. And then he can just kind of do that without thinking, without needing to almost pause. So, for me, anytime my person becomes anxious or overwhelmed, or maybe is triggered, so to speak, he now seemingly can just start breathing. He can seemingly like, oh, I'm going to go for a walk. Or yeah, like he just dives into a bigger, better behavior, a loving behavior, or even become curious about his trigger. Curiosity is a wonderful behavior to kind of dive into. But most people are lacking such awareness that they become triggered and they seemingly fall into a low vibrational behavior, and they don't even ask, like, was that behavior any good? And that is their autopilot. And that's why most people suffer.
I need to steal that, because I think I do a fair amount of meditating practice myself as well. And what was interesting about that experience, exactly to what you're talking about, was that I was aware of it. I remember driving in the car knowing I was feeling it, but I didn't have the tools, I guess, to be able to get myself out of it. But now that you're talking about this, I feel like I should have just had a conversation with that self of like the frustrated person inside of me, essentially.
I think that's the big step, which isn't talked about a lot, is understanding that you aren't the person per se. Right. That's the big one. Is like, I think even in the spiritual community, nobody talks about no longer identifying with the mind. And that's one thing, like, why Buddha was so gangster, I feel. And like, everybody is now more so actually identifying with the mind and identifying with their trauma and identifying with their experiences. And it's actually pulling them deeper in the mind. It's pulling deeper into identification with the person, all of their experiences as consciousness. And I teach the complete opposite. I get people to zoom out in such a way that you can even no longer identify things as traumatic. And that's really hard for the ego to hear. But, if you can really zoom out and understand things are just happening, and sometimes they are shitty and they're horrible, but it doesn't make it personal, and it doesn't actually make it traumatic per se, that is also a story that can be created within the mind. And that's a tough one.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing to go hand in hand with that is just like, and I know you and I have briefly talked about this, of the recognition of there's nothing wrong with the emotions. Let's say it is trauma that are going to come from that, or that you're going to feel from that. It's just not attaching to the fact of like, that is
you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that eventually will allow you to actually heal. The fully heal is when you don't identify with it or create the story around that it's personal, right? Because I grew up in a very abusive household. My stepfather was incredibly abusive, verbally abusive. Because of my level of presence, though, I was able to not create a story around that it was personal, that there was something wrong with me, right? Because that's what happens to children when children are being abused or mistreated, or their parents aren't emotionally available because they're like working too much, or they just don't have the tools to be available. A child creates a story of like, I must not be lovable. I'm not lovable. Something's wrong with me. Or they like completely start being upset with the parent for not being emotionally available. They can even hate the parent. And if the parent were to like beat them or abuse them, it becomes personal. And so like if that becomes that story, that's why it sticks. It really sticks. And for me, accidentally at my high level of presence, I never created the story. So even though my father abused me every day at a high level, and what most people call like traumatic, because I understood that it had nothing to do with me as a child, I never took on the story. So I never took on the energy of that human being. So I never took on the quote unquote trauma.
How the fuck were you that wise as that young?
It was all unaware. It wasn't like I was awareingly doing this. It was just, again, my level of presence allowed me to not create this story. And you know, when you're in a high level of presence, essentially you're in a high level of love, because presence and stillness is the same frequency as love, or at least opens the portal for consciousness, loving consciousness to come through. So I had, even though I was accidentally doing it, you know, when my father beat me, I had love for him. I had forgiveness for him. I had empathy for him. I had love. And I knew it wasn't me. I knew it was like, oh, there's something wrong with him. He's struggling. He doesn't know how to operate. And so I was like, oh, no, it's not me. Even though it sucked, I was like, after it was done, I was outside playing. I was like, just like, all right, well, he's fucked up. It's what it is, you know? And so like but it wasn't like I was like aware of this. It's just how I was operating now that I can look back. And I was like that all the way till literally like that until like age 30, 32.
What's your relationship with your father now?
I don't have one, just because at age 14 or 15, because he was my stepdad, the rest of my family really did suffer, like my older sister really suffered, my brother suffered, my younger sister suffered. And in many ways, some of them still do, but we pretty much got away from that type of energy around 14, 15 years old. We were able to like kind of break free of that household. So again, like I just didn't have a relationship with him after that. It wasn't like I didn't choose to. It's just that, my vibration was different. There was no reason for me to be around it. It wasn't like I hate this guy. Like even now it's like, like I hope he's doing well. I hope he's, happy and healthy and, full of love. And I hope that whatever it is that he was working through, he figured it out. So like, yeah, I don't have, and that's the funny too. If you carry that story of hate, you carry it within you. And that's how this really works. If you can't forgive or love, and that's hard for people, especially if you've been really wronged and, the really serious stuff, that can be really difficult, but that's actually how we quote unquote heal is through love.
Yeah, man. The whole grudge thing, I guess you could call it lucky that I grew up seeing a lot of my family members hold grudges against each other and seeing how just completely wasteful of mental cycles and energy and emotions that it was. I can never remember the analogy, but it's basically like a grudge is the equivalent of hoping somebody else is drinking poison, but at the end of the day, you're the one drinking the poison.
Yeah.
It's like you're just holding on to the negative emotions.
Yeah, and that's I think that's the reason why I was able to never carry on, that energy. It's like I didn't take on their story, because that's how it gets passed down, right? It's their trauma, it's their energy passed down from their parents that beat the shit out of them. So like I just didn't take it on. I didn't become angry. I didn't become spiteful. And that's, like I said, like I know that's very, very difficult as children because the rest of the population does do that. And that's actually what got me really interested in my work. It was again like a DMT ceremony that I did, or a DMT trip that I did in my house, and it made me aware that most people were suffering within the mind. So this experience was pretty cool. I became just consciousness, and I was everything and nothing all at once. And there was a feminine entity next to me in this space of nothingness, and she's filling me up with tremendous amounts of love. And she pauses for a second, acknowledges that I was familiar with this love. And I remember saying, yes, I know this love. And then she filled me up more and more and more and more, and I burst into nothingness yet again. And she pauses again. She's like, you know this love? And I go, yeah. And I remember feeling really happy that I knew who I was, and I knew that I was this love. And like, I loved who I am, and I still love who I am on a profound level. I really love how I operate, and I have a big heart. So I was like, yeah, I fucking love myself. Like, and I have my whole life. And then she goes, well, that's great, but I want you to know that most people have no idea what that feels like. And that's what she said to me. And I felt tremendous amounts of guilt and even a little bit of shame, because I was just so myopically unaware that people were suffering, and I'm like going through life like in my present state, never in my mind. And I realized like, oh wow, like, so why was I able to not take on the family shit, you know? And I became really curious, like, oh, it's because I operate at such a high level of presence. So that's why. And again, presence and stillness is the same frequency as love. So I'm operating from this loving frequency, presence. And that's what we're seeing through Eckhart Tolle. We're seeing through Joe Dispenza. That's what they're teaching and all of these things. And I'm already doing it, just going through my day. And that's where children start off, but experience and pull them from that present space. And then they start creating these stories and programs and conditionings and identifications. And then they get pulled from the present. So for whatever reason, I never lost that. That's awesome. And so I was like, all right, well, how can I help people become more present? And that's how I got into the next stage of my work, which is breath work and meditation and mentoring and stuff like that, and breaking this kind of stuff down, teaching people they have a mind, but they aren't their mind. They have thoughts, but they're not their thoughts. So, yeah. And for a while, I was more so talking about, you know, presence, but it's hard for the brain to really, one, become present, two, for people to step out of the mind, or for consciousness to step out of the mind to realize that they are consciousness having an experience. So I was like, ooh, I have to figure out a different way to kind of manipulate in a way to get consciousness to wake up, so to speak, from the dream that they're trapped in the mind. This unworthiness mind, this traumatic experience that they identify with. And it's like, oh, breath work will, one, alchemize the body and clean it of the energy that's stored in the body. And then two, you're given the brain a task to focus on something like the breath for a period of time, which will lock it into presence. And then from that energy moving around and from the present space, then the portal or window opens, so to speak, for consciousness to flow through and then hit the being, or the sentient being, or the person, with a download of loving awareness of how to possibly see their situation or their experiences through a different lens, a loving lens.
You're giving people your gift, man. I love that so much. Like something that you've carried with you your entire life, that aspect of presence, and now you're finally actually helping people on that on a day in, day out basis. I love that. Yeah,
what's funny is that when I became aware of how I operated was when I actually started becoming more aware of everything, which actually made it harder to be present for the first time in my life. Yeah, because I became aware of pretty much how the world was suffering. I had no idea that people were lost in their mind, that people, like, at group settings the whole time, they're like, I'm awkward, or nobody likes me, or like, what am I doing here? I just said something stupid, like, man, this or that. And there's just all these intrusive, unworthiness thoughts of like who they are, what they think they are. I had no idea. Just none. And then I realized, like, wow, that's 9 out of 10 people. 9 out of 10 people, the reason why they wake up, the reason why they're going to work, the reason why they're working out, the reason why they're on a diet, the reason why they're in relationships, the reason why they stay in relationships. And then I realized that most people are avoiding these intrusive thoughts through coping mechanisms, through addiction, through work, through their phones, through TV. And it's like, whoa, I had no idea. And, you know, and I understood, you know, addiction and why people are actually addicted is because they can't sit in that space because their mind is so fucking intrusive. And so, like, what if I can teach people that to understand that they aren't their mind? And
is that the mission behind your podcast show, Nirvana, Mind and Body?
Yes and no. I think it comes up in conversations, and there's some really fun little gems that can come through for like, you know, little epiphanies can happen, and I think those are great. But mostly it's just to have all different types of people come on to just educate in all different avenues, whether it be like, you know, conscious conversations, but like even things like regenerative farming or training or what have, telling people stories to see if they can maybe create some powerful thoughts within a person to possibly make some behavioral shifts or maybe start seeking different ways of thinking. So yeah, it's a bit of everything. I don't know if there's necessarily a direct angle with the podcast. It's more so just having really great people on that are maybe in the field that I'm doing and maybe a different approach, because I think there's coaches at all different levels. You know, like I personally try not to say like use the word trauma when I work with my clients. I use the word energy. Right. That way we're not reinforcing the story as something, because trauma normally has a negative connotation to it. So I try to remove the idea of something good or bad. Right. Things are just the way they are, and they could be a really horrible, not even horrible, just a really uncomfortable experience that is really powerfully hard and all those type of things. But if we could just see it as that, it could be really powerful and kind of moving through it, as opposed to identifying it as something bad and this is personal. Again, very hard to do, and it takes a lot of practice, especially when you've been through something very, 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 very horrible. And so it takes time, and you know, it's it's tough sometimes.
You're doing good work, my friends. I that expression of like nothing is good nor bad, it's thinking that makes it so, is like one of my favorite expressions of all time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that allows us to kind of go through life in a really powerful way, you know, because I think we think life's supposed to always just be about happiness and bliss and no issues, but that's not reality at all. Reality has the ebbs and flows of comfort and discomfort, happiness and sadness, and that's part of the human experience. So I think that's really important for people to understand. It's not about being happy, it's about being at peace. And if you can master being at peace even when it's horrible, that's the sweet spot. And so you know, and that can be really challenging sometimes. But if you are good at meditating and you're good at stepping outside of your mind, you can really fall back into the present moment and find that peace.
Yeah, I've heard you say it a few times, of just the skill of being able to zoom out.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to my girlfriend about that the other day, about any of the problems that we face in life. Literally name any of them. If you zoom out far enough, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
You are a speck in the sky. You are dust in the wind.
Yeah, and it's hard to do that because, and you know, I have my own personal idea on the ego. It's really hard. So I can go through that real quick. Like, I think, so babies are born without an ego, right? And I think the human brain as a baby, most babies are born in unsafe environments. So at a certain point, the mind creates and manifests what we call the ego to protect itself. But it's not really protecting it, it's just keeping it small and limited. And so it's interesting. So if you identify with your mind and the thoughts that come from the mind, you will also, for sure, identify with the manifested ego that speaks as well. And it's because the brain created it, and most people know that the brain created it, like it's seemingly you're just going to listen to it. And so that's what's really cool about remembering that you are consciousness, having this experience that you aren't your thoughts. So you get really good observing all the type of thoughts that come through. And so if it's a negative thought, you can obviously understand that's either going to come from your programmed brain that has negative programming, or possibly the manifested entity that we call the ego is speaking. And as consciousness, you can look right at it and be like, oh, okay, like, wow, that is a negative thought that just came through. And you don't have to get pulled with it, right? You don't have to think it's you. And then what's cool is you can actually, you know, point it out in real time, like, oh, there's a thought. I'm like, oh, okay, that's definitely coming from that low vibrational ego. And be like, oh, you can acknowledge it and you can give it love. You can give it your presence, your attention, and let it know it's safe. And like, hey, like, thanks for that, but not needed. And then you can do what needs to be done to pull your brain, your person, back into the present moment to see that it is okay, that it is safe. And then you can even, you pay attention to when the higher self is speaking through, which is really kind of cool. And you can observe that, and you can fall into that space and operate from that higher self seat and really guide your person and its ego to see things a little bit better.
I'll never forget my very first experience with what you're describing. Mm-hmm. It's kind of rudimentary. It was back when I was living in Minnesota, and I was driving home from work, and I think everyone can relate to this example, but somebody had cut me off, and I'll never forget is I remember feeling angry, and then the thought in my head was like, oh, that's what anger feels like. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget it. I was like, it literally gave me chills in the moment. I was like, whoa. Like it allowed me to disconnect from it for a second and just recognize that it was just an emotion, and that I didn't need to carry everything else that followed behind it. It was like, oh, that's anger. That's where that sits in my body, and that's what that feels like. And
that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you can do that and that becomes like your practice, like you can manage your thoughts, feelings, and emotions in such a beautiful way, poetically, I would say. Yeah, and it's really powerful stuff, and it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice. The hardest thing, though, is for people to conceptualize and to believe that they are consciousness having this beautiful experience, that they are loving awareness, that they are this universe that is experiencing itself through everything, through everyone, all at once, all the time, through different levels of awareness. Through you, through me, through our dogs, through trees, through rocks, through the space right here that there's nothing there, like everything. And you know, that's a big thing for the brain to comprehend, especially if you identify with the brain and its five senses. It can't really think outside of it. It's too mystical, it's too magical, it's too vast. And the way that you can start to see it, or remember actually who you are, is through deep levels of meditation, zooming out and becoming the soul, becoming the one, becoming universal consciousness. and then you start to remember more and more and more. But if you skip your meditations for a period of time, you'll forget again.
Totally.
Yeah.
I've noticed that as well, man. Like when I get quote unquote busy and don't have time, I definitely notice the effects of losing some of my presence and some of my awareness for sure.
Yeah, that's something that we get comfortable as the person. The person can definitely get comfortable and like take the foot off the gas, so to speak, and I'll stop and I'll start consuming my phone, or I'll get off this diet and I'll start eating low vibrational processed food, and before you know it, you're at a lower vibration again and operating from that space, and you become more agitated, more anger, more egoic. And so that's why, like, I think these practices, these daily practices are really powerful, but also just understanding that it's important to consciously consume. I think a lot of people don't understand conscious consumerism and the importance of it. Like, even if you're meditating every day, if you're not making the behavioral changes from a low vibration to a high vibration, it's always going to be very challenging. And so a lot of people don't integrate once they start meditating. So that's one thing that I really focus on is conscious consumerism, from the music I listen to where I buy my clothes, to the companies I support, to what I'm fully consuming throughout my day. And if I'm working with high vibrational things, and if I'm working with loving vibration through my day, I'm able to stay much more aware of who I am again, and I don't fall asleep. I don't fall back asleep into the dream state, so to speak. I don't forget that I am consciousness having this experience. But if I like, you know, not get my sleep, I'm on my phone a lot, and I'm eating pizzas or some shit, it's much easier for me to forget. And if I'm not meditating daily, it's much easier for you to get and then fall back into the identification to the dream state of this person.
I have 10 rapid fire questions for you.
Okay. First
thing that comes to mind. What's your best business advice?
Man, I'm the worst person to ask that because I don't follow any business model. Again, I am.
Maybe you're the best person then.
Yeah, I think doing what you I think understanding your values, right? Knowing your core values is really powerful. I don't think many people even ask themselves that questions. I think write down your core values, have them on your fridge, know who you are on a very deep level, know your truths and what you stand for. Because if you do that, then you can kind of go through life not worrying about what anybody thinks. So, and that'll drive your business, right? That'll drive who you are. That'll drive why you wake up. So a lot of people don't even know their core values. So I think understand your core values on a very deep level, who you are, like your heart, and then business will thrive. You know, you'll attract that as well. You'll attract the community that vibes with that. You'll be doing things that vibe with that, and abundance follows.
You said you'd be the worst person. That feels like a great answer if you ask me. When are you the most productive?
I would say I'm pretty. I guess what's the definition of productive? So for
see whatever you think, man.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty productive most of the day then, because like I said, I have this beautiful daily practice board that any type of downtime that I have, I'm really good about leaning into my present practices, and I think that's what keeps me most productive, is being present, being authentically present throughout my entire day. I think my morning time and my evening time are very important though, to create that high level of presence when you first wake up. I think being productive for me is the beingness first thing in the morning, as opposed to the becomingness. I think a lot of people, they get up and they get right into their becomingness, which is like what they're trying to create here in this experience, like their work life and stuff like that, where I make sure my productivity is about the present moment. So when I wake up, it's about moving my body in some type of way, followed by some cold plunge, followed by some meditation and breath work, what I'm grateful for. I send love out before I even really think about doing any type of becomingness. And then I always make time for some more beingness midday, a training session, if you will, and then a little bit more becomingness. And then at nighttime, I really try to fall back into the beingness, whether that is sunbathing, grounding, going for a walk with friends, like having friends over for dinner. So like productivity for me is presence.
That makes a lot of sense, man. I like that. What's your best marketing advice?
Be your authentic self.
Great advice. What's your favorite part about business or entrepreneurship?
You know, it's funny, as I never even considered myself an entrepreneur. Again, I accidentally fell into what people call entrepreneurship. I just kind of really do what I love. And for me, it's being of service. Being of service is a really beautiful thing. I don't rely on it for any validation or happiness, but it brings me happiness. So, being of service seems to be the route I think a lot of us are trying to find without realizing it. And I make it about that, just being fully of service and always just about that and nothing else. And
Who's your inspiration?
You know what? I never really looked up to anybody, but I look up to people who not look up, but man, I'm so thankful for people like Jesus. You know, I look at Jesus, he's gangster. You know what I mean? He's like, I look at people who can keep their hearts open during the most incredibly tough times and choose love, choose consciousness. And so I look at someone like Jesus, who in all the adversities, through all the pain, through all the suffering, he kept his heart open. And, you know, like I definitely get hit with hard times. I definitely get hit with uncomfortable situations, painful situations, like when I went through my separation, when I got manipulated this last year through business stuff. You know, there was parts of me where my heart wanted to close, and we're tested like that every day, you know? And so like I make it a point when those tests arise, like, can I keep my heart open? And so whenever I think it's too much, whenever I think I can't hold the weight, so to speak, I can't stay in love, I think of Jesus, and I also think of my mom. You know, my mom came from some horrible things as a child, not a safe family in any way, no safe parents, no safe family, single mom with 3 kids at 19, not at 19, at 23. She had my sister at 19, me at 21, my brother pregnant at 23 when my real dad, who I don't know, walked out. And she had no safe family. And like, man, I can't imagine being in that space as a small 5-foot woman in the whole world with nobody, with absolutely nobody. And so anytime that I feel like things are overwhelmed, I think of my mom, and I think of how powerful she is.
Tell me one secret or something most people don't know about you.
You know, I think a lot of people assume something about me that I don't experience. Hardship. People paint me as like, and I've heard this from people, they as perfect, which is really strange to me. Like, oh, Justin just handles everything so perfectly. Like, he never gets upset or he never gets shook. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. I go through all the same emotions. I just know how to manage them really well. So I think a lot of people find it hard to relate to me because they create this story, this image about me, like I have it figured out, or I know how to manage my thoughts, feelings, and emotions really well. I know how to sit with them and process them. I feel every bit. I probably feel more than most people actually feel because they avoid their feelings. They numb their feelings. They don't actually feel them. I feel my feelings more profoundly than I think most people could even understand. When I go through heartache or breakups or separation, when I think of the things my mom have been through, when I think of the world and what it goes through, I feel those emotions. I'm really good about feeling them, being present with them, fully processing them. Man, I'm one of the most emotional people there are. I just know how to handle it in a really healthy way, and I don't think people quite understand it. Yeah,
totally agree. I've had to tell people that a few times about it's like, it's not that I don't have emotions. I think I process them faster than most people because I'm aware of them. What's your favorite app or resource right now?
You know what? I really enjoy like creating content right now. It's I love like this little recorder thing that I get to. I love writing and like, you know, like things on stillness or things on acceptance, and I love creating and writing and then just recording these things, and then like the Splice app, just like creating content for people to maybe start thinking in different ways. Like I enjoy social media. It's actually really good. Like I don't like how the phone sucks my fucking consciousness in and gets me to mindless scroll. So, but you know, like I don't see social media as good or bad. I really enjoy the fact that I can use a number of these apps to create and share any knowledge or any experiences that I can have that can help people. So like, I mean, simple things like Splice and even Instagram are a lot of fun for me.
What would you change about yourself? I
would like to be more aware, just simply a bit more aware of and not so myopic. I believe it really served me in a lot of ways, but I would like to be just simply more aware. And just a quick side story of like just the funny parts of lack of awareness. Like I was dating this beautiful person one time, and my other friend Misha, who's incredibly cultured, world traveler, just very, very aware. And my partner is very aware too. And her sister was over, and They have a nice bottle of wine. They have this really amazing chocolate. And again, my lack of awareness, like, just grabs the chocolate, eats the fucking chocolate, slams the fucking wine. And I remember my partner looking at me. She's like, you're supposed to like nibble on it and then like have a sip of wine and like totally like, just again, like lack of awareness. I'm like a barbarian. And I remember realizing it right then. I'm like, you fucking retard. It's like, come on, dude. Like, just be a little bit more aware of what is happening. Like, geez, I didn't even get to experience. And they were like, the three of them, like having a little nibble and sipping the wine and like, you know, infusing the ingredients. And they were having a moment because they were aware enough of like this culture thing that you can experience. And here I am just like eating the chocolate, smashing the wine. I'm like, oh, you missed it, Justin. You just fucking missed it. So I think awareness is my big thing that I'm working on, which will improve my ability to help people too. When
were you the happiest?
Oh man, I feel like I'm always the happiest at the moment that I'm at, you know, and I can definitely look at times where I'm definitely really happy, moments with individuals, you know, whether it be a wonderful show and I'm just completely blissed out being around friends and family, you know, whether it was with my previous wife, Steph, and just riding scooters around Venice and being completely in the moment with her. And yeah, I think I've had so many moments. It's hard to really put it on one, but I think for me, the happiest moments are for when people can kind of break free of their mental mind movies and they're starting to see who they are and remember who they are. And I mean, there's nothing better than getting off a call and knowing that they saw it. They saw it for a moment, and that right there will shift everything for them. And that brings me a lot of joy.
Heart of Service, man. What's your favorite part about Austin? And you can't say the people.
I really like Zilker, and I love Barton. I mean, anything for me to be in the sun and on the grass. I really love. Now, like, I'm not going to say the people, but I really love how active the community is here. I love how dog-friendly the community is here. I love how people let you be exactly who you are. There's a lot less judgment here. So, like, yeah, I guess the people is kind of the answer, but I dig the creativity, the art. I love how there's shows every single fucking week that you can literally go to a show any week and dance your ass off and connect with some amazing people. I love how, again, back to the people, I love how there's a bit more people doing the work, so to speak. I love that there's a lot of regenerative farms here. I love that there's a lot of people understanding the importance of like really homeschooling your kids and whatnot. Like I like all that I like the sovereignty. I guess that would be my answer. The reason why I actually moved here. People always go like, why did you move to Texas? And I'm like, for sovereignty, for freedom.
I was just talking to somebody about that yesterday, about they're trying to create more of a message around that and how many great people there are in that space here. I have one last question. Before I ask that question, though, I want to acknowledge you, man, for so many things, for your presence, for your growing awareness, for the insane amount of content that you put out onto the internet, to almost 10,000 posts. And even, we didn't even get into your YouTube channel and the business that you and your wife built, but from everything that you guys have done from a service base, from wanting to genuinely help people, that I think people really feel and appreciate, for your recent love for reading and learning and getting into Eckhart Tolle and some of the great teachers of our time, and for showing up today and just being your authentic self.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was really a blast being here. So thank you. Thanks for giving me the space.
Before I ask my last question, though, what's your plug? Where can people find you?
I think most people can find me at Instagram, Justin D. LOVato. Also, my company, NirvanaMindandBody.com. I think those are probably the two best places to find me. I really don't have anything outside of that I really use. I don't even utilize my YouTube account very much. But yeah, either my website, NirvanaMindandBody.com, at NirvanaMindBody.com, and then, yeah, just my IG.
And don't be intimidated by how jacked this man is. But so my last question is really, whatever your best piece of advice is for other business owners, entrepreneurs, people just newer in their journey of, if they were to wanting to start a coaching business like yours, or a training business, or something in that space of like the early days, and they're struggling to figure out what to do, what's maybe the best piece of advice you could give to that person?
I think getting still. Getting still and understanding who you are on a deeper level will really give you the guidance that you're looking for. I think a lot of people are mostly unsure of like how to do this or how to do that. And and how to show up in lots of ways. But I think if you get really, really still on a daily basis and you get into a high level practice of meditation, you can ask these questions before meditating, and you'll rediscover the answer. And you'll also align yourself with your truest self, which is loving awareness. So then, that'll be guiding you as you build your business, so to speak. It'll be aligned with who you are and your values. So I think just getting still on a daily basis is probably the best thing, not just for business owners, just for all walks of life, to just know who you are on a deeper level. And then that can really transform you into your business.
Justin David LOVato, thanks for being on the show, brother. Hey friend, thanks for listening to the show, and if you have any feedback for me about the show or any other guests that you'd want to see in the show, definitely shoot me a message. I love engaging with my audience and figuring out how I can provide the best value possible to the people listening to this show. Before you go, I only have one ask of you, and that would be to check out my 3 Tips Tuesday newsletter. It's 3 marketing tips every Tuesday specifically for the health and fitness entrepreneur to help them attract new leads. If you press the link in the description, it'll take you directly to the archive of all my previous newsletters, and you can decide for yourself if it's something for you. If you end up finding it helpful, you can just sign up for the newsletter and you'll get it in your inbox every Tuesday. Thanks again, and keep hustling, my friends.